Okay, we're just going to make a short video here on how to use your ZE7000 pin brazing gun correctly. One of the first things you want to check with your gun is make sure there's a little button on the back here. This little button, you press this up and down a couple of times and make sure that the old fuse wire, which is the burnt out section from the back of your brazing pin, this section of the fuse wire has been ejected properly from the front of the brazing gun. Sometimes it gets caught up inside there. You need to shake it, drop it into your hand, make sure it's actually physically there. Okay. Second thing you want to check is make sure that the ferrule holder, which is this part here, and the pin holder, which is the part inside, are actually concentric. Okay, that are actually central, and that somehow maybe they haven't gotten bent out of shape. Occasionally these guns get put down, bang onto the nozzle, and it gets bent out, or the pin holder gets bent out of shape and the whole thing goes out of coordination with itself. Okay, loading the gun. Notice my gun isn't plugged in. Okay, I don't need to plug it in at this point. Okay, I take my pin. Okay, now the brazing pin has this kinked section at the end of the fuse wire. This has to be there. You need this to be here. Do not straighten that section of the fuse wire out. Okay, so you put the pin in first. Okay, get that fuse wire all the way down inside there, thread it all the way through. Now the pin wants to be a very, very tight fit inside here. Very tight fit. So we push it all the way down inside the gun. Okay, and it wants to be able to almost support the weight of the gun. Okay, nice and tight in there. Okay, and it wants to be able to move backwards and forwards. You then take your ceramic ferrule. Okay, the narrow section, the bit without the teeth. Okay, those are the teeth. The bit without the teeth goes in first. That goes around the pin and down inside the ferrule holder like that. Okay, again it needs to be concentric. So when you push this up and down, okay, there needs to be no resistance. Okay, no resistance. So the pin doesn't want to be rubbing at all against the side of the ferrule. If the pin is rubbing against the side of the ferrule, it means that it's off center, and this is going to cause you problems. Okay. The third thing you need, is a pin brazing terminal of some kind. Okay, and what you need this for is, this is a specific distance. This particular size is for a 16mm square cable, and this shoe thickness here is 3mm. All of our pin brazing systems operate with a cable lug with a minimum thickness of 3mm. Okay, minimum thickness of 3mm. So what you do is you put that down onto a hard surface, usually a piece of metal or your pipeline or rail or whatever it is that you're doing. You put your pin inside the terminal, you press the whole thing down flat on top of the terminal. So the ferrule is now squeezing the terminal and the substrate together. Then if you turn your attention here to the back of the gun, you'll notice this section here is moving up and down. Okay, and what you need to do is adjust this bezel until you see the copper part stick out of the top of the gun, and you need to make the copper part on the inside level with the brass ring here. Okay, so when you push that down, okay, this copper part here needs to be completely level. Okay, it needs to be completely perfect. Okay, and note that every time you try and braze another pin, you might need to readjust this, because the pin might be slightly longer, or the ferrule might be slightly shallower, or the cable terminal might be slightly deeper. Okay, so every time, so you always have to set up on top of your cable terminal. Okay, push it down, make sure it's level. Okay, it doesn't want to be bent off at an angle like this when you're making your adjustment. It needs to be completely flat down on top of the ferrule, and you adjust your bezel. This is the most important part of setting up your gun. Okay. Right, now got a little piece of equipment here that I'm going to move into position. Okay, now my battery box is fully charged. Okay, I've attached my earth device to a clean section of this piece of material. You have to excuse this clamp, it's just clamping on this piece of steel here that I'm going to make a connection to. Okay, I take my positive cable, hook it onto the back of the gun, twist it up nice and tight. Okay, I've got my terminal down onto my workpiece. Try and move it so that you can see what's happening, and then I'm going to press the whole thing down check my adjustment once more. Make sure that that's nice and level in there, okay? Okay, now when you hold the gun, you don't want to hold it single-handed. You don't want to hold it double-handed like this. You want to put your other hand around the back of the gun, okay, and the other hand on the butt of the handle. And when you pull your trigger, you want to squeeze the trigger in and hold it in until the brazing is completely finished, okay? So we're nice and level, checked our adjustment, squeeze the trigger, okay? Then I want to release the trigger, okay? Lift the gun, and I want to pull it straight back up, straight up, away, okay? Don't lever the gun like this, okay? Because what happens is you'll make the pin holder wider and it'll make the pin loose, okay? Now the next thing I want to do, the most important thing, is remember that button on the back of the gun? Okay, what we want to do is eject the old section of fuse wire out. You can eject it into your hand, it'll be nice and cool. Just to make sure that that has come out. It's imperative that you get that out. If you leave that inside the gun, you go to try to put another pin in, it's not going to go in properly and it's going to cause some electrical short circuiting, okay? Now what you're left with usually, okay, is a section of pin sticking up. Sometimes the ferrule will stay on there. That's completely normal. Sometimes it stays inside the gun. If the ferrule stays on there, just take it off nice and gently. Okay, make sure you put it away from wherever you're working because it's going to be nice and hot. And then you're left with your cable terminal with a section of the pin sticking out the top. And most of the time, you just take a small hammer and tap it at the top. I can't at the moment because I'm gripped onto this piece of material. And I don't think I'm going to be... Oh yeah, I can. Usually you can just lever it off with a pair of pliers. Okay, normally at that stage then, give it a bit of a clean. Unclamp this. Okay, and there you have your completed pin braze, okay? Now, it wants to be nice and flush, nice even pool of solder around the braze there, okay? So just to recap, incidentally, when you get your pins, there's this desiccant, these small beads inside, these orange beads, okay? These beads turn green when the pins have been exposed to moisture. So if they're still orange, you can pretty much guarantee that your pins are going to be nice and dry, okay? Also, if your pins have been exposed to moisture and oxidization for a long period of time, this silver cap on the end, it won't be all nice and shiny like this, it will actually go white, okay? So make sure your fuse wire is intact, nice and kinked at the top, okay? Insert your fuse wire into the gun, first thing you want to do, okay? We have already ejected the other one, yeah, because you saw me do it. Fuse wire goes in, pin goes in first, make sure it's all the way down inside there, okay? Ceramic ferrule, make sure that's all down inside. Cable terminal, really important, down on top, okay? Push the whole thing down so it sits nice and level. Then make your adjustment. Notice this is still the same, so this doesn't need readjusting. That copper part is still lined up, okay? If I can try and show you this. See, the copper part there is still lined up with the top, with that brass part at the top there, okay? So nice and level. Try and be really perfect, really meticulous about this, because this sets the distance that the arc works at, okay? Then when you're brazing, okay, make sure that you hold your gun nice and firm. So one hand on the handle, the other hand around the back of the gun, make sure it's nice and square. This thing here, as you braze, you'll see this move up and down. So you'll pull the trigger and up it'll go, and as soon as the fuse wire burns out, it'll drop back down. So don't restrict the movement of this. Don't put your hand on top. Put your hand round the back here. And I would look directly at this and watch this thing jumping up and down. Okay, if it comes up and then clunks back down, you know that you've got a good braze, okay? If it comes up and doesn't go back down, usually there's some kind of restriction at this end. So that needs to be able to move nice and freely, okay? Your battery voltage, when it's fully charged, should normally sit around 40 volts. But I'll write this down in the report that I'm going to write, okay? I hope that was a help. and I'll speak to you guys soon.